Why not a scholar and a warrior? Why not be both? If I were to ask you which of these things are you, a lot of people may say that they're neither, but you should be at least one, but maybe something else in between. Because if you're a scholar and you're a coward, you don't have the courage to put forth your ideas. And isn't that something that we've learned recently, that putting your ideas out there can get you murdered? I've met him once. I met your dad once, and from my one interaction with him, I would say, I think probably, yeah. Sometimes you get a sense when you've met some people like that, and then it kind of exudes when you do meet other people like that. You go, wow, they seem to be just like the other person I know, who's a scholar and a warrior, and they are rare to come by. But if it's true that they're very rare to come by, well, now what is Thucydides saying about us? Because he's pointing this out to us. You saw the dates on that. It's 600, almost 600 BC. So this guy's writing, 2,500 years ago. And 2,500 years ago, he's saying that if you have a society that separates its warriors from its scholars, these are the scholars, these are the warriors. He says you're going to have your fighting done by fools and your thinking done by cowards. That's a really bad situation if you have your thinking done by cowards and your fighting done by fools. And if in our minds we just kind of like naturally separate that, that tells us that we live in the kind of a society that he's describing here. If it's rare for us to come across people like this, and it's true these people are rare, but I guess it's this question of why is it so rare? You know, it's like coming across a student athlete. We have a lot of people who are like 4.0 students and very high level athletes. Not so common, but why not? And we tend to like naturally think like those things have to be separate. Like if you're an athlete, then you're just not going to be a scholar. Or if you're a warrior, you're not going to be a scholar. But if you think about what it takes to be a high-level athlete or a high-level warrior, it isn't just walking out onto the battlefield or walking out onto the football field and just showing up. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of practice. And of course, the better you are, you're looking at theory as well. It's not just go out to the field and do sprints. It's also go back and watch video. Go back and see how you performed the last time. See what the team that you're playing against next week, see how they usually play. And to understand they might change the way they play, so you have to be able to adapt as well. It takes a higher level of intelligence. But we kind of separate them out and say, but it's like a different kind of intelligence. Maybe, but probably not. Intelligence is just intelligence. And so I'd ask that question, like where this idea comes from that you have to be just one or the other. Should you be a warrior or should you be a scholar? The answer to that question is probably yes. Last period I was asking them, like, what are the characteristics that make a scholar a scholar? What are the characteristics that make a warrior a warrior? And we see things under warrior like bravery, courage, very similar things. And you asked what does it take to be a scholar, and they had a critical thinker up there. And what you see is if you populate these lists, you're going to see that they both require the exact same things. One has a higher level of physicality to it. True, you have to be physical if we're thinking of warrior in the sense of going out and fighting in wars. But it doesn't have to just be that, of course. It takes a great deal of courage, but not just courage to be willing to do something, it also requires the ability to carry out something. It isn't enough just to say, I know how to fight. It's the ability to carry it out as well. But you also, as you point out, you have to know what you're fighting for. And both of these two things have a great deal of overlap. It's almost like it's by unreasonable force, we have to separate these two categories out. If you're a warrior, absolutely, as Nancy said, it helps to know what you're fighting for and to agree with it. Because if you don't know what you're fighting for, then you're not going to do it well. It's just like if you don't know why you're going to a class or why you're in school, you aren't going to do it very well. It's only when you see a purpose for something. If I told you to go get a job, but you're not going to get paid for it, well, you probably aren't going to want to do it because you aren't going to see a purpose in it. If you say, well, maybe I can get a skill set that's going to help me get a better job later. So now you have an internship, then maybe you might show up and you might want to do that one. But you have to have a purpose for it. And nothing can give you purpose quite like that. But there's also other things that both require. And they did not come up last period. I ended up mentioning them afterwards. Things like honor. If you're a scholar and if you're very intelligent but you don't have honor, you're dangerous. You're a manipulator. You could be a narcissist. And you could find yourself using the warriors. And that was one of the things I was thinking of earlier when we were talking. It sounded like what we were talking about was separating them like physically. Warriors over here and scholars over here, and they never interact. And then the scholars decide how the warriors behave, which just makes the warriors followers. But if that's the case, you don't necessarily have ethical scholars. They could be very happy with just sending people out to die for their own interests, their own gains. And you don't want to have that, because eventually the scholars are going to overcome, so the warriors are going to overcome the scholars. And we think of like somebody being a warrior but not a scholar. They're not just like walking around drooling on themselves and, we're just nothing but brute force. Eventually they're going to look and go, hey, how come we do what they tell us to do? How come we don't just take them over? Yeah, we take them over. We go, no. So you have to have this this interaction between the two, because the scholars have to care about the warriors to a certain degree. But I don't know, if you think about that, why not? Why not a scholar and a warrior? Why not be both? If I were to ask you which of these things are you, a lot of people may say that they're neither, but you should be at least one, but maybe something else in between. Because if you're a scholar and you're a coward, you don't have the courage to put forth your ideas. And isn't that something that we've learned recently, that putting your ideas out there can get you murdered? If you're a warrior and you don't have anything to say or anything to fight for, similarly, you're useless. You've got to have a reason, and you have to have an ability. You have to have a reason, and you have to have a capacity to actually do something with it. And so it's something to strive for, to be a warrior monk. And this idea that we separate these things, that's a pretty recent idea, like in human history. When you look back, like in the Renaissance, we have this idea like the knight, the chivalrous knight. There's a person who was on the battlefield and fought, but also was reading poetry and writing poetry. Now we get this idea like writing poetry. You ever read letters from, sorry, probably not. I'll ask anyway. You ever read letters from like Civil War soldiers? It's unreal. You should look them up. Go online, just Google search letters from Civil War soldiers. These guys are writing in the 19th century, and most overwhelmingly, these are not people who went to college, man. And you read what they wrote, and it's just like, dude, how do you write like that? You never went to school. Because that was just expected of them. You still learn how to read it, you still learn how to write, you still were articulate, but you were also a fighter. You were also a warrior. So to be just one makes you just half of a person. To be both makes you a complete person. And it makes you, by the way, something that is incredibly rare, but also incredibly admirable, and something that everyone could be, which is self-sufficient, to be independent. If you're a scholar who stands there and is like, the 85-pound beta cuck and is like, violence is never the answer, what do you have to do? You have to call the police when someone breaks into your house. You have to run away. Something bad happens, you have to go find an adult figure to step in for you because you're not enough to do it yourself. Or if you're a warrior and all you know how to do is just bash stuff and you can't figure out how to pay taxes or whatever, do rental agreements, whatever. No, man, if you're a scholar, you become a warrior as well. If you're a warrior, you become a scholar as well. That way, you don't need anybody else. You're independent. And if you're independent, then that means that you are, in fact, independent. You don't need anybody else. So you don't have to depend on anyone else. You can live your life, and if other people fit into it, perfect, but you don't have to have anybody around. The people you have around you at that point are the people who you want to have around, not the people who you need to have around. That man's a scholar. You know why? Because a bunch of you have been going in and out, and the door keeps slamming behind you, and we all hear it. Everyone's like, Guy was the first one to actually fix the door as he goes on his way out. So that way he doesn't have to wait for someone to open the door for him. He's a scholar and a warrior. So to be both, man. What's that? Well, yeah, you can't spell scholar without cholo. You can't misspell scholar without cholo. So, questions? concerns, complaints, critiques.